Good morning, Levo leaders on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everybody here on the East Coast. I am trying to record and think that the recording might not be working, so I'm probably going to step out once Jamie starts presenting for a little bit of technical stuff on the side here. But just as a quick intro, my name is Leslie Zakis. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Levo, and I'm really excited that we have a rescheduled office hours with one of our amazing writers and just really an incredible resource for anybody looking for a job, looking for interview advice, and the founder of the Prepary, Jaime Petkanics. So I'll give you a quick overview of her background and a little bit about why she's so amazing. So Jaime was watched the recruiting process when she was in college at NYU and started her career as a recruiter at JP Morgan after working in the financial industry for quite some time, so she can definitely answer questions about what that interview process is like. She decided to try out a different industry and was a recruiter at Tory Burch, which I know all of us really love Tory, so was the second person on the recruiting team at Tory Burch and was there for 2.5 years, where she got a chance to really see the recruiting division grow, see the company grow, and has lots of ideas and experience from what it's like to get into fashion, especially a growing company or a hot brand like Tory. And now she has her own business, which advises young women like us on how to nail your interview. Really how to do an excellent job in putting together a resume that will get through, or will get eyes of recruiters and will get through the process. So we're really excited to have her here today. I'm going to turn over the video to her in just a minute. She's actually here in the Levo office. So we're really excited to be here together. And so Jaime is right here.
Thank you,
We're
Leslie.
switching spots.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Okay. Hi, everyone. So like Leslie said, my name is Jaime Petkanics, and I run a website called The Prepary, which is, as Leslie said, just a resource that should help you in many different steps in your job search. I absolutely adore the Levo League and their mission and everything they're doing, so I'm so happy to be here on office hours today and to share some of my experiences with you. So a little bit of background on me. I was really inspired to start the Prepary after spending 6 years of my career as a recruiter. So like Leslie said, I spent 3 years hiring into extremely competitive investment banking jobs at JP Morgan, and then about 2.5 hiring for even more competitive jobs in the fashion industry at Tory Burch. So at this point in my career, I've screened through probably tens of thousands of resumes, interviewed thousands of candidates, and have hired at least hundreds of them. So after that, I was really inspired to start the Prepary because I know as a job seeker how confusing the job search can be when you have no visibility to what's going on the other side. And the goal of my site and really everything I do is to give people answers about all aspects of the job search. Answers that are relatable, honest, straightforward, and most of all, reliable, coming from someone you can trust who's actually seen the process unfold. So that's really my mission and the goal of my site. So what I want to share with you today is one glaring thing that I've noticed and learned that really surprised me. And that is that across industries, across companies, across locations, there are universal qualities that make a great candidate. And at the end of the day, companies are really looking for the same few things, and I want to share them with you today. So I also think it's always helpful to use an example. So we're going to make up a fictitious candidate, and we'll call her Jane, and we're going to say that she recently graduated with a bachelor's in communications, has done 2 internships, one in event planning and one in PR, and let's say Jane is going to look for a PR assistant role. So we're gonna go back to Jane a few times and use her as an example. So the first thing before anything else that needs to happen for you to be a great standout candidate is you have to be qualified for the role. That means you have to actually have the required technical skills and experience to do the job before anything else. And the thing that tells you whether or not you're going to be qualified for a role is the job description, which is a kind of an underutilized tool, or it's not looked at or taken as seriously as it should be. Because when you really think about a job description, what it is, and I know this from being on the back end, is a hiring manager finally, after waiting for so long and being slammed with work, finally has an opening on their team. And they basically get to write a wish list of every single thing they want in the person who's coming on board. So really read through it and know that the person who's in that job description has a lot at stake. They're not just being churned out by an HR department who has no clue about what's needed for the job. It's really written by the person who has the most at stake. So really make sure that you're taking it seriously. People sometimes look at jobs and they think, hey, I don't really have these requirements, but I can do it, so I'm going to apply. But that doesn't necessarily mean the fit is there. It has to be there on both ends. You have to want the role, and the company has to want you and what you're putting out there for the role. So I realize this is kind of a funny analogy, but think about it like online dating. If someone sets up an online dating profile and they say, I want somebody who's tall and blonde and loves hockey, just because I like that person and want to reach out to them, I'm 5'2", I'm brunette, and I don't really understand hockey, so I'm not going to reach out to that person. So it has to be a mutual fit on both ends. So coming back to our example of Jane, if she sees a PR assistant role online asking for prior PR exposure, a bachelor's, and strong organizational and communication skills, it seems like a good fit. She should probably go for it. If she sees a PR manager role asking for 7 years of experience and experience managing a team, it's probably not going to be the right thing. So not to say don't reach. You should reach. You should reach and be strategic and be thoughtful about what roles you want to go for and really reach high, but stay focused and be realistic, because there's a downside for applying to jobs that you're not qualified for, and that's this. As a recruiter on the back end of my system, I can see your application history with my company. So if I opened a PR role and you applied for that, but then you also applied for an accounting role, you're not going to look like a very focused job seeker, and that's something that is important to recruiters. So that's the first thing that makes you a great candidate. It comes first. It's being qualified on paper with your past experiences for the role. So the next thing, for me and in my experience speaking with other recruiters, that makes a great standout candidate is someone who is extremely thoughtful and passionate about their job search. So after you figured out that you're qualified, make sure you're actually passionate about the job and the work, and have a real perspective on, why you want this certain job at this particular company. And, are you thinking about it strategically in terms of your career and how much it will help you grow? So go back to the job description, right, and read through the tasks one more time. So you've already established you're qualified to do the role, but do you want to? And this part isn't just to make you a great candidate. This is also for your own sanity, because once you get a job, it is a good thing to stay there, and you are going to spend many, many of your waking hours there. So it's important that you do feel really passionate about the work. And if you are passionate about the job itself and the work, next is to make sure you're passionate about the company. So be really thoughtful about it. Is the culture fit a good one? Do you want to work at a big company or a small company? Do you want to work in a formal environment or a casual one? We were actually just having this conversation here at the Levo offices. Even something as simple as dress code, maybe that's something that impacts your happiness every day. So think about the company too, not just the job, and say, is this a place that I'm really going to thrive and be happy? And if you think about that ahead of time as you're selecting jobs to apply for, it's going to come across super naturally when you're interviewing. Because when you're really passionate about something, it brings out the absolute best version of you, and you're going to be able to speak to it really, really succinctly and passionately, and you're going to come across really well. And the reason why being thoughtful and passionate is one of my big four in terms of important things is because I've been on the recruiting side. Companies put a lot of time and effort into the job search process and finding you, and all they want to know is that you're putting that much thought and care into selecting them. And that's really what it's all about, just mutual effort and passion, and that's when the best job fit really occurs. So the third quality is to have a candidate who is super hardworking and eager. Basically the opposite of what our generation is accused of all the time and stereotyped with, being lazy, entitled, having attitude, thinking you're above the work. Being that stereotype does exist out in the world, unfortunately, you have to try that much harder to prove that you do have that eagerness and that hunger and that determination and work ethic. So one way to do that is when you're interviewing is to give examples from the past of times when you displayed hard work and eagerness and tenacity. But also realize that the effort and the work that you're putting into the interview process actually does make an impression on employers. So whether this is true or not, the amount of effort and dedication that you put into your job search and preparation for your interviews, it's going to be seen as directly correlated with how much effort you're going to put in every day on the job. So if we think back to Jane, if as a recruiter I email her and I'm trying to set up a time for her to come and interview with me, is she responsive to my email? Are there typos? Does she show up when she says she's going to? Does she do her research before the interview? Because if she's not doing those things in the interview, why would I think she's going to put her best foot forward on the job when she comes to a meeting, when she prepares for a project? So it's the best example you can give of your hard work is being super diligent and taking your interview process actually really seriously. And it honestly makes a huge impact, especially in a tough job market, where you sometimes are splitting hairs between two really strong candidates. You're going to go with the person who put more effort in because that's what they're going to give to their job every day. So really, really important one. Now, the last quality that I think is really important in being a standout candidate is the one it's near and dear to my heart and named my business after it. It's being prepared. So, this is something that is 100% in your control. So if you got an interview, the company, they think you're qualified already. They read your background and they liked what they saw. So now it's time to go into the interview and leave no stone unturned and show them just how much you want this job. Because again, if you're in that door and they're spending a half hour or an hour with you, they are hoping that you work out. No recruiter or hiring manager goes into an interview saying, oh, I don't want this one to work out. They do. They want to fill the job and they want to find a great match. So preparing for an interview means a few things. One is knowing what you're interviewing for. So we talked about this a little bit before with the job description. Really, look through the responsibilities and say, okay, if I'm Jane and one of the responsibilities is, plan events once a month, and in my internship, I planned a summer event. I want to have that example in mind so I can relate my experience to the job description and to the work. Also, knowing about the company is really important. So when I interview people, I'm always looking for the passion. Do they really want to immerse themselves in the company? Because part of it is being able to do the job, but the other part is loving where you are. And if you love where you are, you're going to be better at your job. So that's definitely something that I think recruiters look for. And know why you want to be there, and convince them of that. Don't assume anybody who you're interviewing with understands you until you really spell it out. That's really important. And then last but not least is know why you are great, be confident, and be able to sell yourself. Speak honestly to the things that you're great at, and don't feel afraid to toot your own horn, and also be self-aware about the things that you've been working on or you've had to improve. People don't want a perfect candidate. They want someone who's human and whose strengths and weaknesses are a good fit for the needs of the business. So the best thing really that you can do is go into the interview, because you can't be anyone other than that. So if you are yourself, you are going to be the most relaxed, the most comfortable. And at the end of the day, if a company doesn't want to hire you after you went into an interview 110% yourself, you probably don't want to be there, because then when you get on the job, it's going to take a lot of energy to be that other person that you were portraying. So at the end of the day, be yourself, be natural, and you're going to get great results that way. And if you don't, at least you can live with it, because maybe this is just not the right fit. So go for it. If you're excited about an opportunity, stand out and be the best person that gets in front of the company. And do your homework. If you thought before an interview, okay, 2 hours of preparing, thinking through questions, thinking through examples can make the difference between getting hired and not getting hired, I bet you're willing to spend those 2 hours. And what I'm telling you from my time in the recruiting world is that does matter. It comes down to that. It comes down to what you put into it. So be prepared. So before we go to Q&A, I just want to say if you are in your job search now or you're thinking of embarking on one in the future, would love for you to visit my site, which is prepary.com, and find a way to follow along, because I absolutely know the advice will be helpful for you in some way as you go through the process. And I also work with clients one-on-one to help them do anything from write a killer resume to prepare for an upcoming interview to just answering random questions that people are wondering about and just want an informed opinion on. So as part of this office hours, I'm offering 10% off of any of those services to anyone that reaches out and wants to work with me. So with that, I guess, should we open it up to Q&A?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Okay, great.
So, okay, let me make sure that I can get back on screen too. Okay, we're just going to push the computer back a little bit. This was wonderful. This was super helpful. Hold on, let's get on the screen. Okay, excellent. Well, first of all, I want to say that I think something you did really well, which I think is always really challenging for people to realize, is that recruiters are real people. And I think that sometimes realizing that the person that you're going in to speak to is not a machine and they're not a robot, they're actually a real person who has also put time and effort in, is kind of calming. But we oftentimes think that the whole process is just this, really structured process that's we're not going to be able to break into. So what do you think is really the worst mistake that you see people make? I mean, I know you talked through the qualities of what makes a really good candidate, but what is that absolute worst mistake that people make in their preparation for an interview?
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of obvious and maybe a little repetitive, but really the biggest mistake that people make is they come into the interview and they already feel like they don't have the job. Mm-hmm. So, they walk in, you can tell they're not feeling confident in themselves. They're intimidated by the atmosphere. Investment banking, fashion, I mean, those can be really intimidating environments, but you have to remember that if a company is calling you and they're scheduling 30 minutes of their time, that means they are impressed with you already. So, you have every right to be confident. You should be super confident. They looked at you, they evaluated you, and they brought you in to learn more. So you should really feel good about that. And I mean, the second big mistake is just not being able to speak to why you want the job or why you want to be there. Pretty much every interview is going to start with, so why are you interested in this company, or why are you interested in this job? So if you're not going to prepare for any other question, just know why you want to be there. Because if someone walks into a fashion company and they're like, well, I love fashion, okay, that's great, but what do you love about it? What designers are your favorite? What have you read recently in the news that you found surprising or interesting? Are you following our Twitter or our Facebook or any social media efforts? So there's such a deep dive you can do, and it's a big mistake not to do it, especially now that the information is so available.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. And I think especially the walking into a job, sometimes you feel so lucky to get the interview that you're so thankful to be there, but the interview is just step one, it's not the end game.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, it is really good to be gracious and appreciative because, recruiters are real people. They spend 60 hours a week trying to find you and interview you. So, being thankful that you got the interview and you have the time is a great thing. No one will ever not appreciate a gracious candidate.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And a lot of candidates are, which is nice.
What is the right time to ask or to send thank yous, and what's the right way to send thank yous? I think follow-up is something that really, in my experience interviewing people, can set aside a great candidate from a good candidate. Mm-hmm. What's your experience and what would you recommend?
Yeah, so disclaimer, this is a little bit subjective. There are probably some industries that operate in a certain way and others that prefer something different, but I think it's fair. I guess I'll just tell you my perspective and then share what I think is kind of the general trend. For me, I have always really appreciated follow-up almost immediately, same day or the day after, by email. Mm-hmm. And a great thank you note. Again, it's the effort you kind of put into it, and it's the same thing with thank you notes. So the best follow-ups I receive is someone saying, of course, thank you for chatting with me. That's always nice. But then also draws from our conversation to say, what impacted them or what they learned that was interesting to them. And then of course reiterate, post the interviews today, I am even more interested in the job than I was before coming in. So just reiterate your interest, because I don't know, so depending on your facial expressions, your body language, you never know if you give off that you are super excited about a job. So there's no harm in your thank you to restate that.
That's really, really helpful to know. And the handwritten thank yous?
Oh, that's a good point. I was going to go there. So I think if you're going to send a handwritten thank you, it is a nice touch. It's not necessary, but if you are going to send a handwritten note, just send an email first, so somebody gets it immediately and you're top of mind for them, and then follow up with a handwritten note and say, I just want to thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. Can't wait to hear more. It can be simple. I think some people like the gesture of a handwritten note.
Yeah.
Everybody's different though, and I do think the trend is gearing more towards electronic communication in general. I never really loved receiving hard copy resumes because they're not in my database, they're not searchable. I would much prefer to have everything digitally, but again, everybody is different, so the handwritten note can be a nice touch.
Okay, that's super helpful to know. Well, enough of my questions. We have so many user questions coming in, so I'm going to actually fully turn it over to Jaime again to take some of our user questions.
Okay,
so let's put you right back on screen.
Great. So the first question is, do recruiters frown upon going to grad school before getting a full-time position? Thank you so much for your question, Megan. That's a really good one. For me, I would say I would never frown on additional education if the person is passionate about it and it fits in with their story. It's not a negative. It will never be negative. But if a job doesn't require, in their qualification section, if they don't require grad school, it might not help you in the search, but it's definitely not going to act against you. And the time that grad school will help you, of course, is if a degree is required, or if your program that you're going to grad school for weaves into your overall story of why you want to do a certain thing. So, in our example of Jane, if she went on to get her master's in media studies, that, of course, even if that wasn't a qualification, it would be a bonus. I really don't think it could ever count against you. Sometimes, though, work experience during the years that you'd be going to school can be valued more than grad school. So, it won't count against you, but it won't always be to your advantage. I guess that's the short answer there. Okay, the next question is it true that HR managers offer you one salary but have 5, 10, 15K more to give if you ask for it? Great question. Thank you, Maxie. That totally differs by company. Each company really does have a different approach on how they approach offers. Some companies, might give you a low offer, and if you don't ask, they might, you'll get that low offer. If you do ask, maybe you would get more. Other companies genuinely have a budget that they're working with, and it is what it is. So it is definitely very different by industry, by company, even sometimes by position. Some positions, especially if you have a very specialized skill set, you might have more room to negotiate versus if the role was really competitive and you have 1,000 people waiting in line behind you, you might not have as much room to negotiate. So there's no overarching statement I can make to say if you ask for more, you'll always get more, but if you don't ask for more, you never will. So, I think know your worth, and if you are going into a conversation like that, make sure you do your research and you're not just saying it. Make sure you are really informed about what the market is, your years of experience, talk to people and get a sense of it versus just going in saying, this is what I want. Thanks, Maxie. Good question. Okay, this one's from Becky. What can we say when we don't have the professional experience required? Should we apply at all? So that's a really good question too. I think that depends. You do want to be qualified for the roles you applied for. So if there's a role that, you know, says 5 years of HR experience and I just graduated, I'd probably say no, you know, don't apply for that role. But if it's asking, you know, if there's a role asking for, you know, prior exposure to marketing and you did a marketing task as part of your internship, like maybe you could work it in and really prove it. You know, I think that's when you really want to leverage your network and your connections, because at face value, someone might look at your resume and say, oh, I don't know if that's going to be the right fit for the role. But I think there are a lot of things people can do now to learn new skills, which is really amazing. You know, when I applied for my first job, one of the skills was, or one of the requirements was must have advanced Excel skills. And you know, a mentor that I had taught me a lot about Excel, so I was prepared for that. But had I not been, you know, you can just go on YouTube for, you know, a half hour and do 3 tutorials, beginner, medium, and advanced, and be able to speak to Excel in depth, or you know, be proficient in WordPress. Like, there are so many tutorials available to people, and you know, resources like Skillshare or Skillcrush as well, YouTube, blogs. I mean, there's a lot of ways to learn about new things. So if you don't have the experience required, first try to gain it, and if you can't, just evaluate. You know, is it too much of a reach, or is it a realistic reach?
And how do you show that on your resume that you've taken classes?
Yeah, I think, you know, a great place to put, you know, skills that you have that aren't work experience would either be in the education portion. So if you took certain coursework as part of an academic program, you could put it there, you know, under where you say, okay, bachelor's in communications. If we're talking about Jane, you might want to say relevant coursework, and list out the courses that are relevant to the job. That will be helpful. And then other skills can go in the skills section. So that's usually probably the last thing on your resume, right at the bottom. It depends on what you're applying for and your different situation, but then you can write, you know, proficient in Excel. It doesn't matter if you've used Excel on the job. I mean, if you took a tutorial and you feel comfortable, I think you can write that, as long as you're prepared to answer to it. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Becky, but I'll give out my email at the end of this, and feel free to email me directly, and I can help you specifically based on your situation. Okay. If you were fired from a job, what reason do you tell the employer without sounding incompetent? Okay, this is a tough one. So people will say different things about this. I personally am a huge advocate of being honest, because not being honest can get you into trouble later in the process. You know, if you come into an interview and you say, oh, I left this job because it wasn't the right fit for me, and then, you know, your employer calls a reference or does a background check, which is pretty common, and they find out that you were terminated, lying is actually worse than being terminated. You can be fired from a role for so many different reasons. You know, downsizing, restructuring, especially in a tough economy. I don't look at this necessarily as a negative. There are so many different circumstances that you might be fired from, and you might be really, really good. So I think the best thing to do is not try to cover it up, be honest, and explain the situation. And I think if you were fired for stealing something, I mean, you might not get hired, but I mean, if you're fired because of the company restructuring and eliminating your role, that is completely fine. You know, your skills that you've built at that role will speak for themselves. So be honest. That's my personal opinion. Okay, great. If you come out of an interview with a meh feeling, should you just write the opportunity off? So this is a great question, because I think people really psych themselves out after interviews. I find this with friends, with clients. People will come out of an interview and be like, yeah, I think that went well, or like, I don't know. And then like a day later, if they haven't heard anything, which of course they haven't because, you know, they're collecting feedback, administrative things are going on, like automatically the next day, even if nothing happened, they're like, oh my gosh, that was the worst. I'm definitely not getting the job. So basically they talk themselves into this really negative place without data. So I think my opinion is that it's not over till it's over. You should never write an opportunity off until the company has turned you down and said you're not right for this job, or we're moving in a different direction. And I think if you spend your time interviewing with a company, they do owe you that answer. You shouldn't accept radio silence. Sometimes it might take a little long depending on what's going on in the process, but you know, follow up and just, you know, get the answer either way. You don't have to write an opportunity off. You don't have to wonder. You can definitely follow up and you know, week 1 say, hey, I'm really excited. What are the next steps? If you don't hear again, you know, 2 weeks later, maybe you follow up. Eventually, you know, you will get your answer. If you don't hear anything back for a month or a month and a half, you can write it off, but don't write it off right away, because sometimes people just cite themselves out when they really did a good job.
That's really helpful. So we're going to take 2 more questions. I know we're running a little bit over, but I think we have 2 more really good questions we're going to take.
Okay, good. Okay. Is there a pattern when doing a computer screening interview? So let's see. So do you mean like when you're screening resumes on the computer, or I think I need a little more info on the question.
More about, like, are more recruiters moving
towards screening through the computer? Yeah. Okay.
And
yeah.
I don't know that much about resume screening, so if you could tell us a little bit more about that too.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, again, you know, this could be different depending on who you're dealing with. Some people still like to print out a stack of resumes and say yes, no, yes, no. I've never been that way. I love to leverage every electronic resource I can because it's efficient. It helps save time. So there's definitely a trend with what's called applicant tracking systems, which is basically just the database of people that you collect when they apply through your site. So if you're applying for a job at the Prepary and I post the job, you will put your resume in there and it will likely go into a back-end system. And those systems are searchable. So if I wanted someone with, you know, PR experience, going back to our example, I might search for, you know, PR assistant as a keyword, or pitches as a word, or, you know, something related to that job, or event planning, or sample management, whatever it is. And then, you know, I would get results that come up. But I would say that right now it's a trend, but not everybody leverages those types of, you know, tools to screen resumes through keywords. You know, I definitely have opened a job and sat through and screened 1,000 resumes in one sitting without looking for keywords, just looking at everyone's background. So it depends on the person and their style. The problem with computer screening is, of course, I mean, the less human elements involved, the more you can miss someone who's great, who just might be a little bit untraditional in background. So that's why I think it's really important, if you know you're qualified for a job and you're feeling super passionate about that job, and you know you could do it and you're feeling great, don't just apply online. You know, reach out to contacts you have, go through your alumni network, look on LinkedIn, you know, at least make sure someone's looking at your resume and that you're not missed. Because sometimes, you know, even though screening is getting a lot more efficient, it is easier to get missed. So only when you're qualified and, you know, you're going to come up as really thoughtful when you do reach out, you should reach out, because it will help increase your chances of getting your resume seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was a good one. Okay, next question is, any advice on how to get an internship if I got a bachelor's 3 years ago and didn't do one during college? Sure. So internships can exist in a few different forms. There are some internships that require that you get school credit in order to participate, and then there are others that are paid internships. At least in the world of legal interning, those are kind of 2 ways. You either get credit or you get paid. That just is what it is. I know it doesn't always happen that way, but you know, that's what it is. So, you know, I think you still can absolutely get an internship or a temporary assignment, or they might call it a fellowship, but it will have to be paid unless you're getting course credit. That's it. That's generally how it works.
Awesome. Well, I think that's
Thank
our
you.
last question.
Great.
So yeah, I'm just gonna come back on screen for a little bit. That was awesome. I hope you guys loved that too. I thought that was really effective. So before we sign off today, I know we're running a little bit over time, so for all of you who are watching, thanks for cutting your lunch break a little bit extra long. But yeah, I wanted to see if anyone if you have any last advice or any last words, and I also wanted to remind those of you in New York who are here, we actually get to keep Jaime all day, and we're gonna keep her stranded here until tonight, where we have an event at 7 p.m. in our office at 833 Broadway, where you can continue asking these questions. So any other questions that you didn't get answered today, or any questions that you'd like to ask her, we'd love to have you at our office for some wine and cheese and question and answer.